Thank you very much. Super impressive presentation and hard to follow. Oh my gosh. I feel like I'm following the Rolling Stones or something. So Cerevel, we are a new company, 4 years old, 2018. And sort of an unusual situation. We were spun out of Pfizer, an investment from Bain Capital and Pfizer in the CNS space. They were getting out of the business. Bain made an investment and started Cerevel. So not, a startup, but like a mid-sized startup. So we went right from inception to sort of our teenage years is maybe the best way to sort of describe our founding. Focused in CNS, epilepsy, Parkinson's, schizophrenia, things along those lines. And our mission there, push boundaries, develop solutions, and transform lives. 3 main programs. This slide's a little bit different. But emraclidine and darigabat and tavapadon being sort of the first 3 programs that we have going on. Tavapadon in phase 3 around Parkinson's, emraclidine around schizophrenia, and darigabat in epilepsy. Again, really difficult problems and very sort of difficult for the patient population. We've had some patient forums at Cerevel, and it is just amazing to see the impact of these diseases on their lives, on their loved ones, whatever. So it's a very noble cause, and I feel really lucky to be able to work with really, really smart people at Cerevel. So Laura, let's start with sort of what was the problem that we've been working on, monitoring trip reports.
And if you can, Rich, tell me you can.
We can hear you. We can hear you. We can hear you.
Okay. We were having some microphone issues earlier. So I am so sorry I can't be with all of you, but I'm excited to be able to talk a little bit about what we did here at Cerevel, along with Google and Quantify to solve a really, especially after the last presentation, a really small problem, but it's a very big problem from our perspective. We use clinical sites to conduct our trials like everyone else does. And we need to oversee those clinical sites to ensure that they are conducting the trial appropriately, so that they're adhering to our protocols, that the data is accurate, that our subject safety is paramount, and that they're complying with regulatory guidelines. And so to do that, we send out contract research associates, CRAs, and like any good oversight activity, it produces reports. And these reports are PDF versions that are sent to us in our eTMF, which is a trial master file where it's the record of the entire trial. So that is step 1 of the oversight. Step 2 of the oversight is, as the sponsor, Cerevel, which has outsourced the work to those contract research associates, needs to review those trip reports. And so we have a percentage of trip reports that we are manually reviewing, and then adding findings, so issues with the trip reports, to a tracker. So that is kind of where our problem started with, is a very manual process. And it tends to be the last thing anybody wants to do during their week. We can, I think, go to the next slide, Rich.
So how do we solve the problem? I mean, this is Excel spreadsheets and manual review, which is just the bane of any sort of IT team's existence. It's something that you want to sort of kill off whenever you can to help them automate that. We were in conversations with Google, and they had some novel ideas to say, hey, could we use AI? Could we use Doc AI, natural language, and the ability of machine learning to understand what the forms are saying and use that to make this an easier process? And it was that plus the introduction to Quantify, a partner that could help us execute on it. Because just the idea by itself is not going to sort of get it done. And I apologize, Laura, I was watching Iron Man last night on TV. So as a technologist, I want to sort of drape Laura and her team in the Iron Man soup. I want to make them better, faster, laser beams, superhuman. I don't want to replace them, right? I'm not looking to use AI to replace this process and have the machine do it on its own, but can I make her more effective, right? Can I arm her and her team to do this at light speed versus the manual and sort of laborious process they're doing today? So sort of the flow. Laura, do you want me
Sure.
to take this one?
Yeah, we're a little thrown off. I think our deck didn't get updated, but yeah. So go ahead and talk about this, Rich, and I'll talk about the details.
Yeah, data ingestion. So we have a commercially available eTMF that houses all these PDFs that are being updated from the partners. Those are being ingested on a periodic basis and thrown into the Google Cloud. We have a classification process where it's reading the forms as they're coming in and determining what was the sponsor, and also sort of reading the form, right? They're not a fixed length, they're variable. There's lots of text on them. So pagination issues and things along those lines. So it is not as simple as it could be a simple forms problem. It is something, if you need something a little more intelligent to understand what the form is actually saying. Entities get extracted. Who was the investigator? What was the site? What were the answers on the form? And then applying business logic to that to say, is this something, in the Iron Man suit, is this something I should be paying attention to, or is this a friendly, right? Is this something that's fine, I don't need to look at it? Again, way more effective than just a random sampling of files that are coming in. And then web interface, part of our infrastructure, hardened, secure, that they can log into and sort of do this work on a day-to-day basis. So talk about this. Do you want to talk a little bit more about
No, go ahead. Go ahead. No, I'm happy.
So it's current data. It's with 14 days of the finalization. And as I said, it is different CROs. So they are different formats. There's not a standardization of this trip report. And again, part of our model being a newish company and running lots of trials is we're leveraging lots of partners. So we didn't have the ability early on in the company to dictate, hey, you'll use the Cerevel form. We're getting what they're using, essentially. And again, this is a daily transfer that's coming into us. Laura, you want to talk about the classification?
Sure. So it turns out that when you're a small company with a small budget, that you do have limitations. And so one of the things we had to do was select which entities we were going to focus on. These reports, as Rich said, are very long. They're very detailed. They have multiple sections with lots of information. And we had to really kind of go through and look at what the key areas that we could focus on for this extraction. And so we looked at the informed consent, so ensuring that the patient understands the trial that they're entering and has agreed to it. Source data monitoring, it's really important. There's a lot of y'all will probably shake your heads at this, but in clinical trials, most of our data is initially captured on paper and then transcribed into a system. And so part of monitoring is taking a look at that paper and looking at the system and making sure that they match. And so that's source data monitoring. So we need to know if there's issues with that, if there's a mismatch. IP management, the investigated product management, making sure that we know where the drug is, who's consumed it, what drug has been returned, things like that. The facilities, ensuring that all of the facilities that the site has are up to our standards and that the study drug is in a secure location, things like that. Site staff delegation of authority. Anybody who works on a trial within the site needs to be tracked as far as what they are allowed to do. Different people have different tasks that they are able to complete and that they are qualified to complete. And so making sure that that's reviewed and that it's kept up to date. We keep a file, the trial master file. The site keeps their own investigative site file, and we have to review that. Adverse events, this is the stuff that you hear about when you're listening to those pharma ads on the TV. So we need to make sure that those are being tracked appropriately. And then finally, if there's action items that come out of it. So those are the areas that we focused on. There's a whole host of other pieces of information and data that is collected on these in these trip reports that we're not looking at for the extraction. So then we went through and started to say, okay, so as human beings, when we're looking at these reports, what are the things that are most important to us? And so we went through for every single one of these sections and identified what would cause us to flag things in our mind. So anything dealing with patient safety, rights, or well-being, that is paramount to every clinical trial. Any points where the site is not complying with our clinical protocol, they're not doing things the way they're supposed to be doing, or anything that implicated a lack of primary investigator, PI oversight, or data integrity. Really, the only product we create within our clinical operations world is the data of our clinical trials. And that is the most, that is paramount to any drug getting approved. Based on all of these different items, we then set flags as far as what level of urgency an issue might be. We had red, yellow, green flags. We're not, we didn't reinvent the wheel, based on kind of how a human would react to finding out that there was an adverse event that was not reported, for example. We also were able to do some really interesting things. So we could, for an overall report, if we had 5 yellow flags within the report, we said that whole flat report needs to be red flagged. We also identified specific language within different sections that if it appeared or language like that appeared, that it would trigger a flag.
The other thing that it does, which is really cool, is it also will look back at previous reports, right? So if it's a nagging problem that's been going on, and that's something the human doesn't necessarily have the ability to do, right? From the standpoint of, can it have perfect memory to say, oh, this site, the last time we had a trip report had that same issue. So it has sort of temporal knowledge to look back and say, hey, this is a yellow that hasn't been resolved over a period of time, that becomes a red as well.
Exactly. Thanks, Rich. I mean, of course, my memory is perfect, but other people maybe don't.
Other people, not Laura.
Other
Sorry.
people.
Sorry.
And this is a really good example of a threshold that we set that does do that temporal look back. We track on for every single report which site personnel were at the visit. And if the principal investigator was not listed in the column 3 or more visits, we flagged that as a yellow. So it's understandable a principal investigator might miss 1 meeting. They could miss 2, scheduling's tough, but we wanted to take a closer look at things if they missed 3 in a row. And so this threshold triggers based on that. And so this is what we end up with, and we're just going to show you a couple of screenshots of the dashboard and the actual report review that we get. And so this is our study level dashboard. And this is going to, that goes into a study, and it shows you for every different site who the investigator is and who the CRA is. And then it gives an urgency flag based on the contents of that report. And you can see that study 5 had a lot of green, but we had 1 yellow report. And once we move into the individual report, just clearly I can't share everything with you also, pardon the blackout information here, but here it gives us a little bit more information about the report, and then it shows us for each section whether something is flagged green or yellow. And it pulls in the actual language from the report. So I don't have to open the report to get a good idea of what happened during that visit. We can move to the next slide. And then it shows me which items are yellow. And so then I can understand whether that's something I need to explore more or not. And if we go to the next slide, the other really neat thing that it does for us is it gives us a link, and you can see that to our trial master file, and it will automatically open the report. So if after I've looked at this report in this summary view, if I think I need to review the entire report, I can do that just by clicking a button. And then I can also disposition it by choosing that it's under review, that it's been reviewed or whatever. And so it allows me to track my workflow somewhat. And for all of you, that may not have been a big thing, but boy, that link to the actual file was a huge win for our study team, because it's very time consuming to open it up in our trial master file.
The actual project itself, again, we partnered with Quantify. Google made the introduction for us. They designed and developed the actual solution on the technical side. It was a 10-week project, so very quick. A US and India team. 10 Quantify folks, designers, testers, project managers, 4 Cerevel folks, 2 of them here in front of you. So not a big staff from our side. Weekly check-in meetings, basically doing sprint reviews of sort of how the project was progressing and providing feedback as we were going. And we've done additional documents since. So FDA 1572s, regulatory agreements, financial disclosures, and from where I'm sitting in the organization, there's lots of manual reviews that are going on, right? Contracts and invoices and purchase orders. And so my job now is to take this pattern and this development and how can I horizontally look across the business and again, kill off more manual processes with Excel trackers and make my folks more productive. The technology utilized on the data ingestion side, Cloud schedulers firing off. Python script inside of Cloud Functions is calling the API, pulling in data, throwing into cloud storage. On the bottom, Vertex AI Workbench and the AutoML natural language, which is taking and reading the forms, pulling out the important bits, doing the scoring, and storing that information into Cloud SQL. Pretty typical UI, Firestore, Angular, Cloud Run, and Cloud Armor to secure the environment. And then reporting, which is sort of goes into the next follow-on phases. Now that we're sort of powering this workflow and making it more efficient, can I pull out metrics and predictive analytics even to say, hey, for the next trial, what's the workload going to look like? Are there areas where the sites are constantly failing that I need to look on, right? So now I have interesting data, throw that into BigQuery, into Looker, combine that with other information as well, and maybe gain some insight on how to overall make our clinical trials more efficient. The architecture I won't go through in detail, but very sort of typical, flowing from upper left to sort of bottom right. Ingest the data, pull it apart using AI, store that, sort of Looker off the right-hand side there, and then feeding that back into a web interface. It is amazing. Again, I'm old enough and gray enough to know this used to be lots of servers and getting a cabling vendor, and when is the how do we adjust the database for the amount of, these are all services. We run a dev and a production environment, very, very lightweight and easy to run and maintain so far. It's been pretty impressive. Again, it allows us, with a good partner, to focus on the business problem and really less on the technology side. And again, it's been a very sort of successful so far from an IT architecture and sort of support standpoint. Lessons learned. Lori, you want to start on these?
Sure. So we have incredibly high satisfaction within the clinical team. We're not large enough to do a survey. We have exactly, I think, 6 people who are impacted by this. But I believe the biggest comment was, this is freaking cool. So I'm very happy there. We've got about 3,000 monitoring trip reports that have been processed so far. And our tracking is much improved from where it was. We still have some manual work that we're doing, and that's part of what Rich was talking about, kind of as we go forward, some improvements. For us, and this is for you all in technology, this is probably something you all knew, but one of the lessons learned was every time we have a new contract research organization who has their own template, their own form, that we need to build out all of the requirements for that CRO. And that was something I was maybe not expecting. And that you need about 100 reports to train an AI, which seems like shouldn't be a hard thing, but it does take quite some time for some of our studies to get to 100 reports. And the other thing was that the AI is going to need care and feeding. We had an issue where a CRO changed from a checkbox to a radio box on their form, and we had to have everything relearned so that they could understand that. Very different than when a human sees that. And Rich, I can let you talk about a little bit about what's next if you'd like.
Yeah, as I said previously, other documents, other groups that we want to sort of go after, both in clinical trials, but across the business, and the dashboards and the dashboards on trip reports and other aspects. Can we pull those metrics out and use that as part of our operational data? You know, some other comments on this, on lessons learned. The 100 reports was way less than I thought. The accuracy is way better for that little of data. And Quantify was actually super clever in that they did some synthetic training, which is to say, we'll just create forms for you. We'll train against those. At least you'll have something to start with. And even that was way more successful and more accurate than we would have expected. Again, for some of the smaller trials that are starting out that don't have a lot of patients to begin with. But that was pretty interesting and a sort of quick action on their part to get us up and running on some of the trials that were coming in. But I guess, and I think this is our last slide, I guess other lesson learned from us is start somewhere. This was a small project from a technology standpoint that has a big impact on a group. It's building sort of permission to proceed to say we want to do some other interesting things. And I guess that'd be my advice is to, again, get an AI project under your belt if you haven't already started. Again, having that success and that internal publicity to say it is not the apocalyptic thing that you sometimes read in the news, and it does have real life applications that can move the needle today. I would dive in and start. And again, now we're able to progress and move to the next thing. But Laura, what else from your side then on our final slide here?
No, absolutely. We're really excited, and it's a small thing that has a big impact. So definitely appreciate that Rich came up with the idea to do this, and that I actually understood it enough to go forward with it.
Thank you very much. We appreciate the time and being able to share